Galangujali Nanagai Banjo Jesse. Wapabara Kujanamara and Bachelor Babun. Good day, my name's Jesse. I'm a Bachelor Kujanamara man.
Yua Yora. Nyaringaigu Vicky Morganson. Ngaya Yamba Warriera Warangu Nawaki. Hi everyone, I'm Vicky Morganson. I'm a Warangu Nawaki woman. Welcome to this course on First Nations Cultural Protocols in Australia by the Queensland Tourism Industry Council, or QTIC. Indigenous peoples live all around the world and have adopted the term First Nations to clearly demonstrate they are the first inhabitants of their respective lands. Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples are two separate First Nations cultures in Australia. Collectively, they have lived on the land and waters for over 65,000 years and are some of the oldest continuous cultures in the world.
Many First Nations cultures also hold invaluable knowledge about managing natural resources sustainably and have sacred relationships with local land, water and territories.
It's important to recognise the value and contributions of First Nations cultures in the tourism industry. They offer unique and authentic experiences for travellers while also providing economic benefits for local communities. In Queensland alone, First Nations tourism experiences account for 2 million visitors each year, with 12% being international visitors.
And that's why this course is designed to give individuals and business owners in the Australian tourism industry the confidence and knowledge needed to respectfully engage with First Nations businesses, groups and communities.
This is a super important topic and there's heaps to cover. So let's jump into this lesson about cultural protocols and why they're important when working with First Nations people. We'll also guide you through some terms to use or avoid with respect to First Nations people.
Generally speaking, cultural protocols are customs and codes of behaviour that help guide how you engage with particular cultural groups.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Protocols establish a basis for ethical and respectful conduct. Really important when interacting with First Nations businesses, groups and communities in the tourism industry. Whether you're working in a visitor centre, organising events or providing tours, you will need to understand and follow First Nations cultural protocols.
Because this will give your business a framework for genuine engagement and inclusion. We asked our friends at Dreamtime Dive and Snorkel about their experiences partnering with local First Nations people.
We love what we do, we're very proud of what we do. So we take tourists out to the reef, dive and snorkeling, hang out with Nemo, and we give them a cultural experience. We operate on Giganti Sea Country, and we work closely with the Garba people and regarding the Giganti people. We have permission to tell their story, and we have the elders share their culture with our crew so we can share it with the people of the world. When you're talking about the longest living thing on planet Earth, the Great Barrier Reef, with the longest living culture, it's a beautiful fit. We're so very excited about our product. Please come on board, check out what we do, hang out with Nemo, and get a cultural experience on Dreamtime Dive and Snorkel.
As you can see, engaging with First Nations groups benefits your business and in turn supports the growth of a thriving, diverse and collaborative tourism industry.
When you, your colleagues and your workplace commit to following cultural protocols, it's a way of showing recognition and respect for First Nations cultures and people. It helps you feel more confident interacting with visitors, making their tourism experience more memorable. A key part of showing respect is respectful communication. To do this, we need to understand some of the common language and terms. For example, you may come across the term elders or leaders. In First Nations communities, elders are men and women who are respected for their wisdom and knowledge of their culture, particularly law.
That's right. So how can we make sure we're using inclusive, respectful language when communicating with or about First Nations peoples in Australia?
Great question, Jesse. Some terms are inappropriate, even explicitly offensive, because they disrespect, demean or minimise the humanity and culture of First Nations people. Like any respectful interaction, it's always best to ask someone how they would like to be referred to. For example, I refer to myself as a Warangu Nawaki woman. How about yourself, Jesse?
I refer to myself as a Bachelor, Wabbabara and Gujranamara man. If you say Aborigines, tribe, horde or band, it will be seen as disrespectful and less appropriate because these are colonial terms. They are outdated and can be offensive. More appropriate terms will emphasise a person's humanity. For example, using the term Indigenous peoples. If you know the specific culture of the person or group, you can use Aboriginal peoples or Torres Strait Islander peoples.
Now it's over to you. Check the lesson notes to discover more about appropriate terminology.
Let's finish up with a quick review of 3 points from this lesson. Cultural protocols are customs and codes of behaviour that help guide how you engage with particular cultural groups. Understand cultural protocols so that you can more respectfully engage with First Nations businesses, groups, and people. And engage with First Nations groups to benefit your business and support the growth of a thriving, diverse, and collaborative tourism industry.
It's really important to understand the country you're on so that you can respectfully address and work with local First Nations people. So in this lesson, we'll learn about country, explore tools such as maps and organisations to help identify traditional custodians, and navigate the use of these tools to build respectful relationships with First Nations communities.
When we say country in the context of First Nations peoples, we're not talking about geopolitical borders or nations. That's country with a little c. Country with a capital C means something a bit different. In Australia, country describes the lands, waterways and seas to which First Nations people are connected. Country borders are often defined by generational storylines or important landmarks like waters or mountain ranges. The concept of country is very closely linked to its traditional custodians, also known as traditional owners. They are descendants of the original inhabitants of an area who have an ongoing connection to the land and waters. So to understand country, we must know who the traditional custodians are.
The question that should always be asked is, whose country am I on? Is it Yagara, Butchulla, Bidjara or Kalkadoon? There are over 250 possible answers to this question, and establishing whose country you intend to visit, consult or operate from is essential to providing context and detailed information. They are the only individuals who have authority to speak on behalf of country. For example, the traditional custodians of Brisbane are recognised as the Turrbal and Yagara peoples, whereas the Butchulla people are the traditional custodians of the Hervey Bay, Angari, Fraser Island region and surrounds. That's your mob, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. And that's why it's so important to be aware of the country you're on, so that you can work respectfully and ethically with the traditional custodians of the land. Sometimes businesses need to make inquiries about permissions and permits before they can operate in certain areas. To figure out the best person to speak with in relation to your query, you need to consider country. But remember, a person from one traditional custodian group can't answer a question for you and your business about the country of another group.
So to help you identify country, online maps and organisations are a great resource. They are an entry point to help you visualise the diversity of First Nations groups and communities across Australia, and the right people to talk to. The most well-known map is from the Australian Institute of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander Studies. It attempts to show many of the language, social or nation groups of Australia and includes the Torres Strait Islands. Let's have a closer look at how to use the tools in a real-life example. This is our friend Olivia. Olivia is designing a new marketing campaign to promote tours in Rockhampton, and she wants to put an acknowledgement of country on the business's website. She looks for Rockhampton on the map by zooming in. It says this could be Durrumble country.
Olivia's next step will be to call the local council or regional tourism organisation to confirm the traditional custodians of the land. Once you know who the most appropriate group is, you can confirm their contact details. All right, she has an answer. This is the country for the Durrumble peoples. Great, now she can correctly acknowledge the name of the traditional custodians on her website.
At this point, Olivia has decided that she wants to find out more about local First Nations groups in her area. She can use the interactive Queensland languages map to search by suburb or country to find more information, like the local language. And here is my tip for you. Always engage with traditional custodians group before incorporating any of their language into your work. This will show a willingness to learn and understand their culture, fostering mutual respect and trust.
Fantastic. Now you know how to find country, peoples, and languages Indigenous to your region. Find links to all these resources in the lesson notes. Now over to you. Search the country your business is on by using online maps and contact the local council or regional tourism organisation. And let's wrap up with 3 main points from this lesson. Country describes the lands, waterways, and seas to which First Nations people are connected.
Knowing about country helps you to respectfully address and work with local First Nations people. And remember, seek permission and guidance from the appropriate traditional custodians who have authority to speak on behalf of country. Have you ever attended an event or conference and heard someone start by acknowledging the traditional custodians of the land? This is known as an acknowledgement of country, and it's become an increasingly common practice in recent years. But what does it really mean, and how is it different from a welcome to country? In this lesson, you'll learn about the difference between welcome to country and an acknowledgement of country. We will guide you on who, when, and how you could include these cultural protocols in your workplace.
Welcomes and acknowledgements show respect to First Nations people as the traditional and ongoing custodians of the land and waters where an event is being held. Simply put, a welcome to country can only be delivered by traditional custodians, whereas an acknowledgement of country can be given by anyone. To understand the difference, imagine you are a guest at someone else's party. It will be intrusive to the host if you started welcoming people, right? Instead, you would acknowledge the host and say, "Thanks for having me." Now imagine you are hosting the party. You would welcome your guests and thank them for coming.
Let's look a little closer. An acknowledgement of country is usually given at the start of an event, such as a meeting, speech, or tour. It often highlights the unique position of First Nations people in the context of culture and history, and their connection with the land and sea. You can also do virtual acknowledgements in webinars and online conferences, and include written acknowledgements on websites or email signatures.
So what's the best way to deliver an acknowledgement? Any tips, Vicky?
For sure. First, find out whose country you're on. Use online maps or reach out to your regional tourism organisation or local council.
That's a great one. It's also a really good idea to plan what you're going to say ahead of time. Even script it out. This is the best way to ensure your acknowledgement is inclusive, authentic, and respectful. Try to adapt it so it suits the context of you and your business. For example, Ecotourism Australia tailor their acknowledgement around caring for country, as they are a sustainability organisation.
Good point. And it's also important to get permission and check pronunciation of any First Nations language that you're including. Your regional tourism organisation or local council should be able to refer you on to someone from the language group in your area. Avoid using past tense. The connection of First Nations peoples with land and waters is not in the past, but a really important part of the present and future. And finally, show respect in every sentence, being earnest and genuine. You don't have to follow the exact wording you've heard before. A meaningful acknowledgement delivers the intent in your own words. Let me show you two specific examples. Firstly, the Queensland Rail Travel website links their acknowledgement to the nature of their business, which travels throughout country.
Another great example is the Bundaberg Region website. It specifically acknowledges the different traditional custodian groups and links to the tourism industry. That covers the basics around providing an acknowledgement of country. Now, what about the welcome to country?
A welcome to country is often given at a significant event, such as a festival, project opening, conference, or community engagement forum. Traditional custodians welcome others to the land of their ancestors. It can take many forms, including singing, dancing, smoking ceremonies, or a speech in a traditional language or English. To include a welcome to country at your event, you'll need to contact the traditional custodians and provide adequate notice, discuss the format, and fair remuneration with them. Remember, if a welcome isn't delivered by a traditional custodian, it has to take the form of an acknowledgement instead. How about we look at a great example of a welcome to country?
Let's do it. Here's a clip of a welcome to country by Eddie Smallwood, a traditional custodian of the Bindal people. In this example, you can see a smoking ceremony where Eddie explains he is letting the spirits know they are welcoming people to their country. The ceremony is also about cleansing spirits and healing for all those present. Now you know the difference. Time to practice. Write an acknowledgement of country for your website or event using your words in the context of your workplace. Download the example of an acknowledgement to help structure yours.
Let's summarise the main points as we wrap up this lesson. Including an acknowledgement or a welcome is a great way to pay respect to the ongoing connection First Nations people have with country. An acknowledgement of country can be delivered by anyone, and a welcome to country is only delivered by traditional custodians to welcome others to the land of their ancestors. Did you know that since 1993, the relationships and rights between First Nations people in Australia and land and water have been protected by Australian law? It's called native title, and it's a critical part of ongoing respect and appreciation for traditional custodians of the land in Australia. Over 50% of Australia's landmass has some form of rights and interests from Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples. 32% relates to native title, and it's increasing.
So in this lesson, you'll learn about what native title is and what legislation supports it. We'll also go through the history of the Native Title Act and how you can apply this information to your business. I'll now hand over to our native title expert, Brian.
Hi, I'm Brian Barrow, a Meriam man and principal lawyer at Jarama Legal. First, I'd like to clarify exactly what native title means. Native title is recognised under Australian law when Aboriginal and or Torres Strait Island people make a successful claim to the federal court for native title. Based on the applicant's traditional laws and customs, the court determines a bundle of rights on how the land and waters can be used by the traditional owner group. This is not the same as having legal ownership of the land. The main goals of the Native Title Act are to recognise and protect native title, assist with future dealings, create a process for determining claims to native title, and allow for past acts to be validated. To prove native title, claimants usually need to show connection to country through evidence of an ongoing system of law and custom that gives them rights to the land. This process may take many years. Basically, there are two types of native title: exclusive and non-exclusive. Exclusive native title gives First Nations people the right to possess, occupy, and use an area to the exclusion of all others. This means the native title holders have control over who can access the land. For example, if you would like to run a tour in a particular area, you would need to get permission from the traditional owners. Non-exclusive native title exists alongside other property rights, which means native title holders don't have complete control over access to the land. They may have the right to access, hunt, and camp on traditional country, but they cannot control others' access or use of the area. But how did native title legislation come about in the first place? Well, it all started with a well-known and publicly documented case. The Mabo case was a significant legal proceeding in Australia that recognised the land rights of the Meriam peoples as traditional custodians of Mer, or otherwise known as the Murray Islands in the Torres Strait. When the Mabo case was handed down, the media reported that First Nations people would take over backyards and even a whole skyscraper building in Sydney. This was proved to be incorrect, and amongst other concerns led to the government passing the Native Title Act in 1993, some 12 months after the Mabo decision. This act established a framework for recognising and protecting native title interests. There are many reasons why native title is so important for Indigenous and non-Indigenous people alike. I would like to highlight a few of them. Firstly, it established a clear expectation about the relationship with the land and waters for both Indigenous and non-Indigenous parties. This recognition is essential for the well-being and identity of First Nations peoples, and it acknowledges a long-standing connection that they have to the land. Secondly, it protects the land and waters, ensuring that future generations can benefit from their use. This protection helps to maintain ecological balance and cultural heritage for years to come. Thirdly, it sets up relationships between Indigenous and non-Indigenous parties, creating a foundation for cooperation and understanding. And finally, native title provides business opportunities for various parties. Aboriginal and Torres Strait Island people can leverage their native title rights to establish businesses and generate training and employment opportunities. As a tourism business that requires access to land or waters to conduct your operations, my recommendation is to stay up to date with any changes in the areas that you operate. Native title claims can be made or amended at any time. Under the Native Title Act, native title holders must establish a corporation called a Prescribed Body Corporate, or PBC, which will manage and protect their native title rights and interests. PBCs have certain prescribed obligations under the Native Title Act. PBCs must also register with the Native Title Tribunal, which in turn establishes it as a Registered Native Title Body Corporate, or RNTBC. The main obligation of a PBC is to manage and protect native title on behalf of the native title holders. PBCs can deal with a broad number of matters, including Indigenous Land Use Agreements, or ILUAs for short. These are agreements between governments, companies and the PBC about future developments on the land. Exercising, negotiating, implementing and monitoring native title agreements, and consulting with native title holders. They may also offer other services such as welcome to country services and help advise you on any business-related queries relating to country. If you are a new or existing tourism business, it is advisable to discuss any access issues with the relevant PBC, as well as what services the PBC may offer to incorporate into your business. For example, memorable cultural experiences. As you can see, there are so many aspects to keep in mind when operating a tourism business. But don't worry, we've gathered all the important information for you. Download additional resources at the end of this lesson.
Thanks, Brian. Native title can be tricky to navigate, but knowing the basics is a great start. Now it's over to you. Firstly, find out who the traditional custodians are for the country that you are operating on. You can start by contacting your regional tourism organisation or local council. From there, identify if there are any PBCs that operate within that area and what rights and interests they have on the lands and or waters. You can search the name of the traditional custodian group on the nativetitle.org website. We'll provide a link in the lesson notes.
Lastly, here are the key learnings to remember. Recognise the traditional custodians of the land in Australia by understanding that native title includes two types: exclusive and non-exclusive rights and interests. Recognise and respect native title where applicable in the areas that your business operates. Ensure you have a strong working relationship with traditional custodians, including their representative bodies, such as PBCs, and keep up to date with any changes in the areas that you operate, because native title claims can be made at any time by a native title group. Understanding local cultures and markets is crucial when working in different parts of Australia. Without this knowledge, it may be difficult to negotiate deals or work with suppliers. In this lesson, you'll learn about the importance of First Nations procurement, what it involves, and tools you can use to identify First Nations businesses. And you will also find out what black cladding is.
Firstly, let's explore the term First Nations procurement. It's about procuring or sourcing products and services from First Nations suppliers. Anything from the contractors you hire to the napkins you use in your cafe. First Nations procurement is an effective way to help foster the growth of First Nations businesses and, in doing so, increase employment opportunities and economic participation for Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples. For example, if you own a gift shop in a popular tourist area, you could source and stock First Nations made products such as artwork, jewellery and clothing. This not only provides a unique offering for your customers, but also supports local First Nations artists and businesses.
That's right. And by actively seeking out and promoting these products, you can help raise awareness of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander cultures and contribute to the economic growth and sustainability of the local community. Sourcing verified First Nations suppliers can also help address the issues of black cladding.
What does black cladding mean, Vicky?
In simple terms, black cladding is when a non-Indigenous business gives the impression they are Indigenous in order to benefit from opportunities meant for genuine Indigenous businesses. Black cladding in Queensland's tourism industry might include a non-Indigenous business appropriating Indigenous artwork and names in order to appear Indigenous owned, or joint ventures that represent Indigenous interests and Indigenous cultural and intellectual property, but don't establish equitable benefit sharing. For example, only 5% of the profits are returned to the Indigenous joint venture partner. By raising awareness about black cladding, we can create more opportunities for trustful connections with First Nations people, products and culture, and feel confident that we are not partnering with disingenuous businesses. This will help to support sustainable economic and social benefits for First Nations communities.
A good way to find First Nations businesses is through the Supply Nation website, Australia's largest database of verified Indigenous businesses. They recognise an Indigenous business as being at least 50% owned by an Aboriginal or Torres Strait Islander person. So let's say you are looking for a photographer on the Gold Coast. Start by searching the Supply Nation website. Type your key term and location in the search bar. Then press search.
Did you know that you can refine your search as needed using the side menu filters? Feel free to filter and sort by range, expertise, and other options.
Great tip, Vicky. Here are the results. Select the profiles you're interested in to find out more about each business.
Looks easy. But are there any alternatives to finding First Nations businesses?
Yes, the Black Business Finder currently has more than 600 Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander businesses. Check the links for these resources in the lesson notes. So now we know all about how to find genuine First Nations businesses. What's next?
Did you know there is a great initiative for your business? It's called the Pledge for Procurement, and it involves 3 simple steps. The first step is to include First Nations businesses in your supply chain to provide goods and services. The second step is to create real job opportunities for First Nations people. And the third step is to raise awareness about black cladding and promote genuine working relationships on equal footing. By following these 3 steps, the initiative hopes to create a more equitable and inclusive tourism industry.
Now it's your turn. Try navigating the Supply Nation website and search for verified First Nations businesses you're interested in. Then support First Nations businesses by becoming involved in the Pledge for Procurement.
Now let's recap 3 points from this lesson. First Nations procurement is an effective way to help foster the growth of First Nations businesses. It increases employment opportunities and economic participation for Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples. And black cladding is when a non-Indigenous business gives the impression they are Indigenous in order to benefit from opportunities meant for genuine Indigenous businesses. Respectful communication with Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples is a fundamental part of achieving meaningful reconciliation, as described by the Australian Human Rights Commission.
And reconciliation means improving connections between Indigenous and non-Indigenous people for the betterment of everyone. So let's dive in and learn more about how you can communicate effectively to support reconciliation efforts.
Have you heard of a Reconciliation Action Plan, or RAP? It's a plan that businesses can follow to show their commitment to reconciliation with First Nations people in Australia. RAPs are created in partnership with Reconciliation Australia, and they help businesses of all shapes and sizes to incorporate reconciliation into their activities and goals.
Lots of companies in Australia have RAPs that include goals around training and employment, procurement and more. A good starting point will be the Reconciliation Australia website and their document, Which RAP is Right for You. We've provided relevant links in the lesson notes.
If a RAP doesn't feel appropriate for your business at this time, there are other ways to show your commitment to reconciliation. One way is to create an Indigenous engagement strategy. This involves setting specific goals and actions for engaging with Indigenous communities and supporting their cultural traditions and contributions.
Another option is to create a statement of reconciliation. This is a public statement that shows your business is committed to reconciliation and values the traditions, protocols, and contributions of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples. It's a simpler approach that can still make a meaningful impact.
Since these initiatives help businesses show their commitment to reconciliation, how can we demonstrate our commitment through day-to-day respectful communication? Good manners are important in all business transactions. When working with First Nations individuals, businesses, and communities, good manners include active listening, observing body language, and not being too loud, pushy, or overbearing. It's also important to be honest and clear about the purpose of the engagement. This means explaining your intentions and the scope of your activities and proposals, being transparent about your organisation's capabilities to meet community expectations, and following through on any agreements you make.
Let me share with you 6 tips for respectful and honest communication with First Nations people. First, customise your approach. Communication is not a one-size-fits-all approach. Every community and individual is unique, so it's important to respect diversity and appreciate differences in traditional and contemporary practices, as there are different cultural protocols in remote and urban communities. Next, avoid using outdated terms or making assumptions about someone's identity based on their appearance. Instead, ask respectfully how they prefer to be identified. Our third tip is to always seek permission from the family if using the name, voice, or image of someone who has passed away. And don't forget to display a warning notice to avoid causing distress or offence to the deceased families and communities. Next, speak clearly and listen carefully to avoid misunderstandings. Keep in mind that not everyone speaks English as their first language. My 5th tip is respect all points of view and avoid pushing your own opinions, even if you disagree. This is especially important when working with elders or in remote areas. And lastly, pay attention to their body language and don't assume that avoidance of eye contact or delayed answers mean disrespect. Give people time to listen and speak.
And remember, communication is a two-way street. By being respectful and mindful of cultural differences, you can build positive and meaningful relationships with First Nations people. Another way to enhance your understanding of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander cultures and how this might affect your business communications is to undertake cultural competency training. Check the guide document attached below this lesson for examples of cultural competency training organisations.
Now, let's hand it over to you one more time. Consider if our reconciliation action plan, engagement strategy, or statement of reconciliation might be appropriate for your business. Take a moment to reflect on any interactions you've had with First Nations people. Have you followed the 6 tips for respectful and honest communication? And before you go, remember these key points. Reconciliation means improving connections between Indigenous and non-Indigenous people for the betterment of everyone. Customise your communication style with the intention of being respectful and inclusive of different individuals' needs and cultural protocols, and expand your confidence in communicating with people of other cultures by exploring cultural competency training.
Congratulations on completing this course on First Nations cultural protocols. We hope that the content delivered throughout this course has given you valuable knowledge and skills to help you engage with First Nations businesses, groups and communities in the tourism industry in an ethical and respectful manner. If you're curious for more, keep up to date with initiatives by the Queensland Tourism Industry Council. We've attached QTIC's best practice guide for working with First Nations tourism in Queensland. And remember, by following First Nations cultural protocols, you can build positive relationships in your region and with customers, and enhance your tourism offering to create a more thriving and diverse tourism industry.